Hey there, true believers. It is your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco, and I am back again with you today in time for another issue of The Amazing Spider-Man. Uh, Hope everybody, as of the recording of this video, we're in January of 2026. And so I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday and the kickoff to the new year. I am a little under the weather. I'm recovering from a cold. So if you hear the sniffles and the coughs, my apologies in advance. But we're going to get through this together. So today we're looking at Amazing Spider-Man number 45. It is the second of a two-part story arc featuring the Lizard. So in the first one, real quick recap, the Lizard returned. Dr. Connors thought, even though he was cured, apparently the transformation into the Lizard is something that can happen again, and it does, while he's waiting for his family to come home. And he and Spidey fight, injuring Spidey's left arm. So Spider-Man is down to one arm with like a sprained elbow or sprained shoulder, and he has the Lizard to battle. And so we kind of left it on not a cliffhanger per se, but just a what's going to happen. How is Peter slash Spidey going to overcome this obstacle now with one arm? So this is the second part of that story arc, and I'm very excited to go through it and show it with you. So without further ado, let's go take a look at the comic and check it out. And here we go. Here is the cover for The Amazing Spider-Man number 45. Very It's a cool cover. It's a good cover. There's some stuff we're going to talk about. Of course, I'm going to go through all the basics. If you're a fan of the channel and of this series, you know where I'm about to go. So first of all, let's talk about the what we're seeing here. This is a scanned PDF copy of the original comic. So back in 2004, Marvel collected one of every issue of The Amazing Spider-Man, that first volume of run, and scanned it into the computer and then sold it on CD-ROM discs. And a big stack of CD-ROMs at that. So that's what this comes from. So this is actually looking at what it would look like from the 1960s when this comic came out. And so you're going to see all the original ads, the original, yellowing of the paper, the wear and tear, all that kind of stuff. Of course, the other thing I just want to say is, again, thank you to everybody who is following this channel and all of my subscribers. You guys are the best. My goal was just to review these comics for a number of reasons. One is just I felt like maybe today there was a lot of people who didn't know the history and where Spider-Man came from. If your first experience with Spider-Man is in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s or the movies or cartoons or video games, you may not know the history and where it came from. And so I wanted to really review that and go over it with everybody. And the feedback and the response and the following and support of everybody has been really amazing, and I appreciate you all so much. I say that because we are heading very quickly into 1 year. We are almost at episode 52, and so at that point, that'll be 1 year's worth of episodes, and we'll have a big celebration. That'll be a really fun thing. So anyway, here we go. This is Spidey, and this is a great cover. Terrific idea of the yellow background. Obviously, you have Spidey in his red and blue, so yellow is the third primary color, so that really makes the character pop out. And of course, as well, you have the Lizard with his purple and green elements. So again, yellow is another nice color that will make the figures pop away from the background, make them very vibrant and active. The other thing that's really great about this cover is the circular composition. So we've talked about it a little before, and I'm going to do a little bit in here to talk about composition. So I'm going to insert an image here. And this is an example of classical compositions that are used throughout any kind of art, whether that's classical paintings, drawings, illustrations, whatever. But it's the idea that these shapes and putting the elements of your drawing into these various compositions are classic and will provide a lot of interest to the eye. These are proven, time-tested methods of composition. So What we have with the cover, we're going to cut back to in a second, is a circular composition. And so that's here in this slide. You can see it's one of the options, or one of the, again, classic compositions that you can use. So when we see that, it's just a psychological thing that brings pleasure to our brain, or it's easy for us to understand a pattern. So it's a natural pattern that our brains can recognize quickly. So let's cut back to the comic. And here's what we have. So we do have this circular composition. So you have from Spidey to the tail, to the leg, around, and the lizard's arm creates this spiraling circular composition. So your eye just keeps moving around and around and seeing all the details. So that's a really good composition. It also keeps it at the center of the image, which again is another great use of the composition. The only thing that I didn't like about the cover was this copy down here. So copy is all of the words that are on the cover. So in this case, Spidey smashes out. But what you have here is it doesn't match up with the imagery. The imagery is that you have a wounded Spider-Man who's strapped his arm to his chest because it hurts so bad, and he's down on one knee and one hand, and the lizard is looming over him. I would have liked to have seen something that maybe is a little more questionable about, is Spidey going to make it? Will the lizard win? Is this Spidey's end? Things of that nature, so that we don't know what's going to happen. So Spidey smashes out doesn't really match this imagery. It continues here as the in the splash page as the main title. And again, as we said, this is from the 60s, so looking at the indicia down here, it looks like this is February 1967. So we are heading deep into the 60s, and it's interesting, of course, to see how things of the time kind of begin to fill their way into the story, especially on the Peter Parker side of things. That said, this is a great splash page. I love it. It has a bunch of tools here that you want to see in a splash page. It's a big image. It's kicking into the story. It's giving us a little bit of a recap that explains why he's injured. He talks about he's got to find the lizard. You have an upshot, so your camera is slightly below Spider-Man, looking up at him as he's walking on this web across, a span of buildings. So that is terrific. We have perspective, so the webbing is coming at us. So as you can see, it gets larger here in the foreground closer, and then smaller as it goes away towards this building. So you have some nice perspective to create depth, or the illusion of depth. And then we also have what's called a Dutch angle. We've talked about this before, but it's taking, instead of your buildings being straight vertically to the ground, perpendicular to the ground, you take them and you tilt everything slightly, and it just creates a more interesting angle. It's something that you wouldn't see with your own two eyes. Typically, it means you're sort of floating in space and turning and twisting. And so again, it brings interest in image and emphasis to the imagery. So this is great. The body of Spidey is terrific. Great pose. The way he's bent the limbs to walk on this web, and you can see it actually sort of bends down under the weight of his feet. Terrific. That is just an awesome splash page. Then we get into some quick action sequence. Again, I think this is just a quick little bit to tell you that Spidey is still effective. He can still fight and do stuff. He's flipping around, kicking people, punching bad guys, stopping some hijackers, even with his bad arm. So again, just a quick piece of that. So very nice use again of moving the camera in, out, and around. So you have like a little close-up of the face over here where he's seeing the hijacking going on. We pull out a little bit to a medium shot where we see Spidey, then a long or wider shot where we see the environment around him as he's taking on the crooks, and then back, to eventually and another close-up here of his fist punching out the last bad guy. So great use of moving the camera, keeping it interesting, and a nice quick little action sequence. Still looking for the lizard. This is the lizard's family sleeping, and I like this use of color. So it's at night. So you have the blues to indicate shadow and darkness, which I think is a really nice touch. Again, today with modern comics with computers, we can color. There's an infinite number of colors. And I think what a lot of people would do is a lot of colorists would color these people with, real colors. So let's say her hair is blonde and they have Caucasian skin tone. You would color it and then you would just make them darker to show that there's not a lot of light. But I like the idea of that blue. It's just it's something, of course, that has to do with the printing. They didn't have all the color options at this time in terms of just how the printing technology worked. But it's a nice storytelling element that just kind of maybe isn't used as much as it should be. The other thing, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit because I like this piece as well. This is a great image of the lizard coming in through the window. Great body posture, clawing through the window, lifting himself in. Terrific. Again, that Dutch angle, slightly right. You could have that window sill be completely horizontal, but you tilt it a little bit, and it makes things a little wacky, a little weird. But these lines. So the lizard is behind a door, and there's a glass window here, and now you could have shaded this all in. But what artist John Romita did, and now he's the penciler and inker again on this issue, just like he has been recently. He did a lot of vertical. So this isn't technically hatching. Hatching is, well, there's cross hatching and hatching, but these are just vertical lines to indicate there's a shadow behind the door, but maybe there's a little more light there, so it's not a solid black shadow. And I really like that little touch. It's small and subtle, but I think it's really good. And then over here, as the lizard is trying to figure out the lizard formula that Dr. Connors used, so you can turn other people into lizards, then, or I guess he wants to make other lizards into humanoid lizards. I'm not sure, but anyway, he's trying to create a lizard army. But the hands here are very nice, very expressive, very important. If you want to, it's still imagery when you can't show moving emotions. Hands can be very important, especially with a character like the lizard that doesn't have the same kind of human expressions that we have. Or even like a character like Spider-Man, where they're superhero whose face is masked. Having hands be expressive is very important, and these are excellently drawn hands. And again, either aspiring artists take note. That's a great use of the body posture and hands as expression. And then this is awesome. So I talk about this a lot in what is called a page turn. So imagine if this was a paper comic book and you're holding it in your hands. You don't know what's on the page on the other side of this right-hand page. We're reading from left to right. We're going to flip this page and see what's there, and you don't know. And boom, there's this rage. He can't figure out the formula. The lizard brain can't understand the chemistry, and so he just lashes out. And that's a terrific page turn. I like doing that myself in my own comics. I like seeing it when it's done in comics. It creates an excitement for a reader. You don't know what's happening. And even though we're reading it panel by panel, in order, page by page, there's just a natural tendency from page, on the left, your eyes are going to see what's on the right. And so kind of what's happening. So there's not a big mystery here that the lizard is trying to go into his old laboratory. That's fine. But this part, excuse me, of the lashing out is a really excellent page turn. Terrific stuff. Great use of the background. Little up shot, or down shot rather, or where the camera is above looking down to show, the laboratory and what he's kind of wrecking. And then he runs away down the building. And I like this. It's funny. I was working outside of my house today, and where I live, we have lots of little lizards all around. They're called anoles, and they're little green So, well, they can change colors. Sometimes they're green, sometimes they're brown. Long tails, kind of long faces. They look very much like the lizard. And the idea of him climbing headfirst down the wall was exactly what I saw some of these doing today as I was putting away some Christmas decorations they were hiding behind. And so I saw these little lizards, and here we are talking about the lizard and how it climbs up and down head first. Perfect. It's very lizardy. It's great. And I like the vertical. So you could have done this if you're doing 4 panels. You could have had a big one at the top, and we could have gone, 3 more, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3. Any combination of that page layout. But the vertical lets you see the whole tail. It emphasizes that height on the building, that he's going up and down the building. So that's a terrific use of the vertical panels here. And again, back to the nice blue coloring to show that it's dark, the lights are off, and then you have all the heavy shadows behind. Perfect, perfect, great stuff on that page. Really, really like it. Excuse me. Here we have just some stuff talking about Peter. So we've got Foswell from the the Daily Bugle. He is apparently, so I mentioned this I think in the last episode, maybe the episode before. I was like, wow, I didn't realize he had stuck around so long. Reading old back issues as a kid, I didn't remember Frederick Foswell for very much at all, but he's still here 45 issues in, and he's still kicking around. And now he says he's going to take it on himself to figure out how Peter gets his pictures of Spider-Man. So there's a little plot thread there. Maybe something's happening there. We have Ned Leeds and Betty Brant planning their wedding, trying to decide they have to invite Peter. Of course, Peter is Betty's old ex-boyfriend. Peter trying to decide how is he going to mask his hurt arm as Peter, and decides he just can't. He's just going to tell everybody that he hurt it riding his motorcycle. And then you've got some interaction with Flash Thompson and Harry Osborn. And here we have even deepening of the Harry Osborn, Peter Parker friendship. So Flash, ribs him about his injury. Harry is on board, and then tells him like, hey, if you need to make some money, my dad has a chemical company. He might be able to help you out. You might need some help, basically. And so he's like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then of course you have Peter is in his mind is, he's thinking about Gwen. But then you also have Mary Jane has shown up, and there's some Mary Jane stuff going on there. And so overall, this is what's going on. And of course, we can't forget that Aunt May is down in Florida, I believe, recuperating. And of course, she's like, Peter's fine. So now we have Spidey searching for the lizard in kind of lizardy places. But I really like this. It's not a montage, because a montage, I guess, would be like one big image with, Spidey moving through it. But it's a nice sequence of searching. And so one of the things when from the first few issues that John Romita did, I really called out how much I didn't like the way he drew Spider-Man swinging around. That it wasn't very Spider-Man-like. It was very stiff. It looked like a regular person hanging on a rope. He's definitely getting the hang of it now. Even with one arm, these are really good images of Spidey moving in ways that Spidey should be moving. Especially here, this upside down on the tree looking in the zoo. And I love this one, using his webbing to lower himself down to this reptile house exhibit. I think that's fantastic. So even though the composition of the page, right, we talked about composition at the beginning and those different uses, this doesn't really follow those. This is a little bit dull in that there isn't a big emphasis in any one segment. So if you have your rule of threes or any of those other ones that we looked at, it's not there. They're all equally emphasized, but they're very nicely drawn. Every pose is different. Every environment is slightly different. And so it's a really, really nice job. Terrific here. He finds the lizard and attacks. But so I love the wide panels. To me, either wide panels or large panels are terrific for big action. We want to see that as a viewer. We're used to that when it comes to things like television and movies. So we really enjoy that. It becomes more theatrical, I guess, if you will, when you see that wide action of people moving back and forth through that, whether it's fighting or whatever it is. Now, there is one problem to this that I did not like, and I noted it, and we're going to talk about it a little bit here, and that is what's called the 180 rule. I think I've tried to talk about it before. It's hard to explain without a visual representation, so I found an image, and I'm going to put it up here so that we can talk about this. So here is the 180 rule, and this is typically used for filmmaking, but as I've mentioned before, basically comic books are very similar to filmmaking in terms of the direction you're using or creating the imagery in. It's not moving, but it's still the same idea. We're telling a story with pictures, and so a lot of the same rules apply. For example, I talk about things like down shots, up shots, close-ups, long shots, establishing shots. These are all terms that are used in film and are used in comic book composition. So what we have here is when you have two figures facing each other, there is a line. You draw a circle, and there's a line that cuts that down the center, and that line is your 180 line, meaning all your action, your camera. So in the imagery here, let's say the camera is on the left. You can move that camera 180 degrees, which is half of a circle. So as long as you don't cross that dotted line, everything is fine. You can move that camera as far as you want, up, down, left, right. Everything is fair game. That way, your figures are always in the same position. So if Spidey is on your left and the lizard is on your right, no matter where I move that camera, Spidey's on the left, the lizard's on the right. Now, they can switch positions, but I can't switch the camera because if I cross that 180 line, it looks like they did a little do-si-do where the figures changed. So now they're facing other directions, but it's not. The characters didn't move, the camera moved, and that can trick or confuse the viewer. And that's what happens here. And it happens a couple of times in this issue, but this is the first one. So let's cut back to the comic. Okay, so here we are back at that page. So as I said, we have the 180. We have Spidey is coming from the left, attacking the lizard. In panel 2, he's now coming from the right. So that means that camera moved across that 180 line. So basically, let's pretend for a minute that the camera right now is in front of the lizard here, looking straight on at the lizard. Now the camera has gone too far the other way, so that Spidey looks like he's coming from the other direction, and then it switches back in panel 3 so that they've landed on the ground and we're back to where the camera position was for panel number 1. So that doesn't make sense. You can't leap from the left, flip in space, unless unless you're a character like Superman who flies and then come from another direction. So panel 2 should have had Spidey hitting the lizard coming from left to right, and then that all makes sense all the way through. So that's an issue. Likewise, sort of here, we've done sort of the same thing, right? So Spidey is on top of the lizard punching him. They are both facing camera or viewer, reader right. They're facing our right. Now, when the lizard whips his tail around and hits Spidey in this next one, both of their heads are facing reader left. So again, and here's the problem. Your train is here. So here's the train tracks. Here's the train as the background. This is the same train and background. So how did their bodies spin around 180 degrees to face in the other direction? Unless there's a train, they're fighting between two trains, but we haven't seen that. That hasn't been established. You need an establishing shot to show that there's a train on both sides. Otherwise, it just looks like their bodies spun 180 degrees. It doesn't make any sense. I think the idea is you can see this little piece of wood here. I think it's supposed to be trains on both sides. But again, that's not established. When they hit the ground here, you would have had to maybe show a down shot, a wide angle down shot of the tops of the trains, the tracks, and then the two people fighting in the middle. Then as you flip it, maybe it makes sense. In this case, it's a little confusing. That all said, we're gonna move past the 180 rule. It does do it. However, this is phenomenal. This image of the lizard stretched out using his tail and the way Spidey is bent around is awesome. This is incredible. You feel that weight of his whole body spinning over from the blow. If you are a fan and an aspiring artist, I did do a video on this book. It is called, actually I have it right here. It is called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way by John Buscema and Stan Lee. And one of the things that's in there is that it tells you if you have an action, so somebody throwing a punch, or in this case, Spidey flying backwards, make it as extreme as possible. There's a range, right? So you would be standing, you would be hit, and then you would start to bend. You could draw Spidey at any of these points. He could be hit here, hit here. The further you bend and the further you move them, the more energy there is. So this is terrific. It really shows off the force of the blow, and it's an awesome page and an awesome drawing. Again, still good choreography to the fighting. Again, there's the 180 rules, a little tough. We're close here, flipping from behind Spidey to behind the lizard, but we understand it. That's okay. But it does flip back and forth a lot. But that's okay. Again, great body posture here. Spidey being thrown into the train. So the way his legs are bent around and stuff is awesome. And then this panel down here where he's down on his knees, trying to recover because he just, got thrown into a train. You feel the weight on the knee. You feel his body curved around itself. There's weight and mass to the form. It's drawn very, very well. John Romita is using all the tricks of the trade here. The Dutch angle, the moving camera, figures in the foreground, shaping the action in the background, action lines, the energy or motion lines from, up here, this part where the tail hits Spidey punching back. I mean, it's all there for us to view. And then here's what I'm talking about earlier in an establishing shot. So an establishing shot tells us all the details of the environment we're in. And I think this would have been good back here maybe. So once they land, you could have had a small establishing shot of this, that they're fighting between two trains, and then you have more of a close-up of Spidey punching the lizard, then the tail strike and everything else. This is a great establishing shot to show us that there's a lot of trains, so there's a lot of reptiles for the lizard to control to send after Spidey. Really nice piece here. I like, again, great use of the big panels to do it as well. It emphasizes the amount. If we had zoomed in on Spidey and you only saw a couple of snakes or one crocodile, it's not going to feel as dramatic or threatening. So great use to emphasize the danger there. So here we have Mary Jane talking with her aunt about Peter, and that, he's a little nerdy, but she really likes him. But of course he's not home. And then Spidey fighting off the reptiles. Good stuff. Nothing crazy or super exciting. Again, I would say, and we have a advantage today that they didn't have in 1967, and that is the internet. So what I mean by that is, artists, aspiring artists, young artists, new artists, in general, here's my advice to you: be careful when you include real world animals in your stories. If you don't know how to draw them, you can fake them. These are not real crocodiles. These are not photorealistic crocodiles. There's a general shape to them. We recognize them as crocodilian, but they are not exactly looking like real crocodiles. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But in today's world, if you're going to do that, do a Google search, get some crocodile reference. It's very easy. It's out there, and you can draw a more accurate crocodile, and that will really help. When you have Spidey fighting sort of cartoony, made up crocodiles, it's, we kind of go, it takes you out of it a little bit. So again, they didn't have that reference. You would have had to find things like National Geographic magazines and stuff like that, and nobody would have worried about it. Again, these are comics that are coming out every month, and they're not considered super fine art at this point. And so I don't think anybody would have worried about it. But again, a little snake references, some crocodile references certainly would not have hurt. So Spidey can't let the lizard get away, so they're on the moving train. This is nice choreography. We talk about that a lot. How does a character move from panel to panel? And so Spidey, takes a little a side hit from the tail, but he's got his hand on the ladder so that he can use it to then swing around and kick the lizard in the face. That's nice because he's got his hand on the ladder already, and so it's just a matter of swinging his body through. That really meets, and then the way mid swing he's now landing. So that's terrific. That's nice choreography from one moment to the other. Again, we have a little bit of that 180 break where he's moving from right to left and now left to right. Not my personal preference, but it kind of is. It is what it is. But very nice stuff here. Spidey has a plan. He's going to take the lizard, and he moves him into a refrigerated car, knowing that lizards cannot thermoregulate, and so this should weaken the lizard, which is exactly what it does. And again, nice use of the color. So you've got the lizard and Spidey in two different tones of blue for the most part, to help separate the figures. Then you also have a lot of white and light blue in the backgrounds as well. So it really emphasizes that cold feature or feeling. Again, from a psychological standpoint, light blues are great for things like cold. Dark blues are great for shadow and water, stuff like that. But terrific work there. And of course, he does win. So the lizard's been defeated. He cocoons him up and brings him back to his lab to see if he can cure him one more time. And this is what I like. So in the John Romita era of Spidey, we have seen him fight a few villains. And I like the combination of Peter's scientific smarts and Spidey's powers, and that's again what we're seeing here. We saw that like with the Rhino, he can't outpunch the Rhino, so he develops with Dr. Connors some chemicals to dissolve the Rhino's armor. Same thing here. He can't just outpunch the lizard, so he's smart enough to say, "Hey, I'm going to cool him off and get him to slow down and essentially almost hibernate, if you will." And again, that's smart. That's not just, I'm just going to haul off and try to outpunch you. I'm going to outsmart you as well. And now using his scientific knowledge to try and cure Dr. Connors, which successfully he does. So there we go. So the Connors is cured. He's back with his family. Everybody is happy, and Spidey takes off. Now this is weird. This panel here has no word balloons. So, you'd think he'd be like, Spider-Man, we can't thank you enough. Yes, Spidey, you know, you've saved our entire family. You're the best, Spidey. And he says, "Oh, guys, you know, you're gonna give me a big head. I won't be able to. I won't be able to. If I stick around much longer, I won't be able to spin a web anymore." Something silly, but they just left it. And then, but there's this panel up front, so it's not a printing error that they then fixed. He says, like, this is, I guess, Stan writing this dialogue. We're gonna leave you blank, and you can write your own dialogue. And I'm like, what? Why would he do that? So I don't know. It's just so random in the middle of a comic. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. I found that I was like, that is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So then there we go. Peter's back and musing about a million things when he bumps into Harry and Mary Jane and has to pass. They're going to go out to the club. They're going to go to the disco, as she says. And Peter's like, "No, I can't. I'm busy. Sorry, I gotta head home." And so he leaves them. So now he's musing, the ever classic Peter Parker at night, woe is me, morose Parker musing. So he can't, if he's Spidey, he can't go, I guess, keep breaking dates with Mary Jane. He's not really sure. How does he feel about her versus Gwen? He says she's like it, but he likes Mary Jane, but she's pretty shallow. And then I don't know. And then of course he didn't get any pictures, so he can't have any money. Aunt May's going to be home soon. He's going to have to explain his injured arm. He's behind on his schoolwork, and it's all because he's, you know, Spider-Man. If he wouldn't have to be Spider-Man, everything would be okay. And he sits alone in the dark and is like, woe is me. And of course, the Connors here are like, Spidey's the greatest. He must have the best life ever. Great for Spidey. But Peter is alone in the dark, bemoaning his lot in life. Classic Peter as we end the book. And that's it. So we're going to cut back over to the desk here and wrap everything up. So there we have it. Amazing Spider-Man number 45. The Lizard has been defeated again. Peter is, again, bemoaning his woe in life. Spidey is coming between him and his social life. He doesn't know where he's going to get his next paycheck. How is he going to explain things to Aunt May? Will he keep up with his studies? The usual Parker stuff. So we'll have to see what happens in the next issue now that we've wrapped up this storyline. I like this. This is great. I love the multi-part storylines. I think that's great. It's, if not only is it good storytelling, but it's a great marketing plan. Get your audience to come back next month when the conclusion of the story isn't concluded. Now Spidey's even in a bigger hole with the injured arm. What's going to happen? So I like that that idea. It also gives to longer form storyline. You could have a 2-part, 3-part, 4-part, etc. ongoing action storyline. I think that's great. The Lizard as a character is interesting. I think John Romita has really captured a neat vision of the Lizard, and again, maybe a little more consistently depicted in his vision. He's really getting the hang of Spidey, how Spidey moves, how he looks. Terrific stuff. Big, wide panel action. I love it. Much less of the grid stuff. That seems to be saved for your day-to-day Peter Parker life. I think that's a great idea as well. So overall, terrific issue. I'll give it a nice 7.5 out of 10. I think it's very good. Not one of my favorites, not any big classic moments, but some really neat stuff there. So that's my rating. I'm very interested to hear from you. If you have any thoughts about the issue, what you think, what you liked or disliked, leave it in the comments. I do try to check all the comments for all the videos. So I thank you all for participating. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week as we cover Amazing Spider-Man number 46. So everybody, here's to you. Here's to kicking off 2026 with even more amazing Spider-Man. Thanks.